Last moments of Randy Jones, the quiet ending of a Padres legend, the final footage. The sun was setting over Petco Park, casting long, amber shadows across the empty seats, each row a silent witness to decades of cheers, triumphs, and heartbreaks. Somewhere in that fading light, a quiet figure had once walked these paths. A man whose presence was felt in every corner of the stadium, yet whose humility had made him nearly invisible to the untrained eye. Randy Jones, left-handed pitcher, Cy Young Award winner, and the very heartbeat of a young franchise, had left the world. At 75, his story had come to a close, but the echoes of his impact lingered, resonating through the hearts of fans, former teammates, and a city that had grown up with him. The announcement from the Padres arrived like a tremor through a community unprepared for loss. Words carefully chosen, solemn, reflective, never fully explaining the emptiness left behind. And yet, in those few lines, the gravity of a life lived with quiet greatness was unmistakable. Social media erupted, journalists scrambled, and the city collectively paused, trying to reconcile the man they knew, from highlights, from jerseys, from small gestures at the ballpark, with the reality of his absence. This is not a story about statistics alone. It is a story about a life shaped by precision, resilience, and humility. It is about a connection forged between an athlete and a city, a bond that transcends the field, the scoreboard, and even time itself. It is about the quiet ending of a legend who never sought the spotlight, yet defined it in his own way. Before the roar of the crowd, before the bright lights of the stadium and the thrill of victory, Randy Jones was simply a boy from Fullerton, California. Born on January 12, 1950, his world was defined by wide skies, dusty baseball fields, and the quiet rhythms of a life shaped by family and small-town values. Even as a child, there was something deliberate in his movements, a careful thoughtfulness in the way he approached life. Whether tossing a ball to a friend in the driveway or studying the swing of a batter at a local game, Randy observed patterns, learned lessons, and honed a skill that would eventually define him. At Brea Olinda High School, he began to understand the precision that would become his trademark. Coaches noticed his unusual focus, the way his arm moved, not with raw power, but with intention. His sinker, even in its earliest form, had a subtle deception, a movement that seemed almost alive, unpredictable, yet perfectly controlled. While other pitchers relied on velocity to command respect, Randy relied on strategy, patience, and a clarity that belied his age. Teachers and teammates described him as calm, approachable, and quietly determined. He was not the loudest in the room, but his presence was felt, steadying those around him in ways that few could articulate. College offered a new canvas for his talents. At Chapman College, Randy's discipline and intelligence flourished. Here, under the guidance of mentors who understood his methodical approach, he refined his mechanics and deepened his understanding of hitters, spins, and situational pitching. Each practice session was an exercise in observation, adjustment, and mental toughness. By the time scouts began circling, it was clear that Randy Jones was not merely a pitcher with potential, he was an architect of the game, someone who treated baseball as a puzzle to be solved, a challenge to be respected, rather than dominated. Yet for all his athletic focus, Randy's life was not defined solely by the sport. He was a son, a friend, a figure who valued relationships as much as personal achievement. Those who knew him well remember him for his laughter, often quiet but contagious, and for the way he made time for others, even amidst the growing pressures of a career that would soon demand all his energy. He was curious about the world beyond the diamond, reading, learning, and appreciating the subtle joys of everyday life. There was a balance in him, a groundedness that allowed him to pursue excellence without losing sight of the humanity around him. The early 1,970 seconds brought both anticipation and uncertainty. When the San Diego Padres selected him in the 5th round of the 1,972 MLB draft, Randy stepped into a world that was at once exhilarating and unpredictable. The Padres, still a young franchise struggling to define its identity, offered opportunity but also exposure to pressures that could break or elevate a young athlete. For Randy, it was a stage he was ready to approach with the same deliberate composure he had carried since childhood. Debuting on June 16th, 1973, he began the slow climb that would define his career. Those early years were far from easy. The team lacked stability. The league was unforgiving, and expectations for a young left-handed pitcher were anything but certain. Yet, through each inning, Randy's precision, patience, and intelligence emerged. While others relied on raw talent, he relied on observation, study, and a methodical approach that would, in time, transform him into a pitcher of legendary consistency. Journalists covering the story remarked on the atmosphere outside Petco Park. There was no chaos, no clamor, only the quiet presence of people paying homage. Fans stood together in silence, some holding hands, some alone, all bearing witness to the impact of a life that had become inseparable from the identity of their city. Local broadcasters captured the scene with reverence, carefully framing the stories of grief, admiration, and collective memory. Even in the midst of sorrow, there was a sense of unity, a shared recognition that what they were witnessing was the end of an era, and yet the enduring imprint of Randy's presence would continue to resonate. In that moment of discovery, it was clear that the reaction to his passing was not merely about the loss of a great athlete, but about the absence of someone who had embodied a certain kind of grace, humility, and quiet excellence. The city, the team, and fans nationwide paused to honor the man who had for decades quietly defined what it meant to be a part of the Padres' story. The discovery was not a single act. It was a series of ripples spreading through hearts, homes, and stadiums, touching everyone who had ever experienced the steady calm of Randy Jones in action and the warmth he offered off the field. And as the day wore on, the realization deepened. This was the moment when memory began to crystallize. When stories would be told, legends recounted, and the true measure of a life, its quiet, pervasive influence would become clear. It was a discovery not of a crime or tragedy in the conventional sense, but of the profound emotional truth that the people of San Diego and the baseball community would now live with. Randy Jones, the pitcher, the mentor, the friend, the constant, was no longer among them. Yet, in his absence, his presence felt larger than ever, echoing through the stadium lights, the stories told by fans, and the quiet recollections that would be carried for decades. That was the enduring impact of discovery, not shock, not drama, but the bittersweet recognition of a life that mattered deeply to so many. In the aftermath of Randy Jones's passing, the investigation was not one of crime or mystery, but of memory, impact, and legacy. It unfolded quietly, methodically, not with flashing lights or sirens, but in the careful reconstruction of a life that had touched countless people, both publicly and privately. Journalists, historians, and team archivists stepped into the role of detectives, piecing together decades of moments that, together, painted a portrait of a man whose influence extended far beyond the pitcher's mound. The first step was understanding the timeline, Randy's journey from Fullerton to the major leagues, from a young left-handed pitcher with meticulous control to a legend whose number 35 would eventually hang in the Padres Hall of Fame. Old scorebooks, photographs, and newspaper clippings became evidence, the building blocks for reconstructing the life of someone whose career had been both extraordinary and understated. Each record revealed nuances. The slow, deliberate delivery that defined his pitching style, the quiet mentorship he offered to rookies, the moments of vulnerability when injuries tested his resolve. In the hands of those who chronicled his life, these details were pieces of a larger truth, waiting to be assembled. The emotional strain was palpable for those closest to him. Former teammates revisited old games, remembering both victories and defeats, grappling with the finality of his absence. Family members shared photos and letters, recounting moments of private guidance and humor that had never been in the public eye. Even journalists, accustomed to chronicling triumphs and tragedies, felt the weight of responsibility. To honor a man whose life had been lived with such integrity whose influence had touched so many in ways both visible and invisible. The investigation also explored the dichotomy of visibility and humility that defined Randy's life. On the field, he was a public figure, a Cy Young Award winner, an all-star. Off the field, he was a mentor, a friend, and a quietly generous presence. Investigators documented this balance, seeking to illuminate both sides without diminishing either. It was in these discoveries that the depth of his character became most apparent, a man whose greatest victories were often invisible, yet whose impact was undeniable. In the end, the investigation was less about uncovering hidden truths and more about weaving together the threads of memory, achievement, and humanity into a coherent, respectful story. It was a pursuit of understanding, a search for meaning, and an effort to ensure that Randy Jones's life would not only be remembered but truly comprehended. It was an emotional, intellectual, and human inquiry, a cinematic investigation into a life defined by quiet greatness, one that would leave a lasting impression long after the final out had been recorded. The city of San Diego, the Padres organization, and the countless fans who had followed his journey all became participants in this investigation, each contributing to the reconstruction of a legacy. And in that meticulous, compassionate work, it became clear Randy Jones's story was more than a career. It was a testament to character, resilience, and the enduring power of connection. As the lights dimmed over Petco Park in the days following Randy Jones's passing, there was a quiet, almost meditative awareness that a chapter of San Diego baseball had closed. But even as the stadium emptied, the story of his life remained vivid, a tapestry woven from decades of precision, patience, mentorship, and understated brilliance. Reflecting on his journey, it becomes clear that Randy's influence extended far beyond wins and losses, beyond Cy Young accolades and all-star appearances. His legacy was a testament to the human capacity for grace, resilience, and connection, even in the relentless glare of professional sports. In life, he had shown that greatness is not defined solely by talent, speed, or raw power. It is, instead, measured by the steadiness of character, the patience to guide others, and the humility to recognize that one's achievements are only as meaningful as the lives they touch. Young pitchers who once struggled under the weight of expectation remembered him not as an intimidating figure, but as a calm presence, someone who demonstrated that mastery could be achieved through thoughtfulness, focus, and relentless discipline. Coaches, teammates, and fans alike carried forward these lessons, consciously or unconsciously, ensuring that his philosophy endured long after he left the mound. There is also a broader reflection to be drawn from Randy's story: the subtle, enduring power of influence. In a society that often celebrates spectacle, the life of Randy Jones reminds us that true impact is quiet, consistent, and human-centered. He touched lives not with flamboyance, but with respect, mentorship, and authenticity. His story encourages viewers to examine the way we value our heroes, not for the headlines they make, but for the lives they change, the communities they inspire, and the example they leave behind. This reflective pause naturally leads us, here at the final footage, to consider the role of storytelling itself. By documenting lives like Randy Jones's, we honor not just events or achievements, but the emotional and moral landscapes that define them. Every gesture, every choice, every quiet moment of leadership contributes to a legacy that deserves to be remembered, studied, and celebrated. Our mission is to give viewers a lens into these stories, providing context, empathy, and understanding, showing the human heart behind the headlines. For those watching today, Randy's story offers a moment of introspection. It is an opportunity to ask ourselves, how do we recognize influence in our own lives? How do we honor those who quietly shape our experiences? And how do we pass those lessons forward? By reflecting on lives lived with integrity, we engage with the deeper questions of human connection, resilience, and the subtle art of leaving the world better than we found it. As the season of remembrance continues, we invite viewers to honor Randy Jones in the way he would have appreciated, with gratitude, calm reflection, and a recognition of the ways one life can touch countless others. Share your memories, your stories, and your appreciation for those who quietly make a difference. Let the legacy of character, humility, and service guide your own approach to life, work, and community. And here, at the final footage, we encourage you to stay engaged with the stories that define human experience. Subscribe to our channel to explore more cinematic true crime, human drama, and reflective narratives that examine the extraordinary in the ordinary. Like, share, and comment on the stories that resonate most, because every life deserves to be remembered, every legacy honored, and every lesson preserved. Through these stories, we aim not only to inform, but to inspire, to shine a light on the quiet heroes whose lives teach us the meaning of perseverance, compassion, and influence. Randy Jones's life was one such story, a reminder that even in the quietest of moments, one individual can leave an indelible mark on a community, a sport, and the hearts of those who watched, learned, and loved. In closing, the story of Randy Jones is more than a baseball tale, it is a reflection on the human spirit. His legacy, grounded in excellence, humility, mentorship, and community, will endure in the hearts of San Diegans, fans, and all who value integrity and quiet leadership. In remembering him, we remember the potential within all of us to shape the world gently but profoundly.